Three, two, one.
Well, what's going on, Metaverse Church podcast friends? So good to be hanging out with you again this week. And today we are talking about AI and virtual reality and the impact that might be having on people. Because as you probably know, AI is a hot topic conversation at this point in time right now, especially with our friends over in the United States Capitol. So Goose and I are going to sit down. We're going to talk about this and just our experience, some of our thoughts and whatnot on it. And when Goose and I were talking about this off air, Goose was talking about how excited he was to have this conversation. So Goose, you ready? Here's the lob. You're up, bro. Let's talk about AI and VR and how that's impacting people. What you got?
So yeah, I mean, I'll get into the story that I've got because to me it was very interesting, and I think it highlights something that has been. This isn't going to blow the lid off of anything once I get into it, but I don't think we've fully appreciated where this might be headed in our context. But so. You and I have already talked quite a bit about the various uses of AI, and there's a lot of great uses. I know you guys have used it. We've talked about it on the podcast. In the ministry context, you had one thing. What was it that was really helpful?
Yeah, so for us at Lakeland VR, like we have used it just to generate artwork, especially like during the Easter time. I just kind of plugged into an AI art generator and said, hey, here are some elements of like Holy Week. Give this to me in a watercolor, type of artwork kind of thing. Just give me some unique kind of design, which it does. That's what it's great for. In fact, there's even one image that I have that is like a callback to the Garden of Eden. I'm like, dude, this will make a killer tattoo. I might have to get this done at some point. But I've even used it just to ask like questions of like ChatGPT on like, hey, like define community for me. Like if you were to like ChatGPT, if you were going to define community, how would you do that? Which is actually a question that you and I chased on this podcast. Like, what is community? And so it gave me like 5 responses in that. And then I asked ChatGPT like, hey, what are some great ways to just approach digital ministry as a whole for a church? Which, Chat's a really good friend of ours. We've used Chat before in the past, and he's pretty upfront and honest. Like, hey, I'm not religious per se, but if I were to give you some of my tips and tricks, here would be. I'm like, thank you, Chat. Thank you for your honesty. So that's just kind of how I've used AI in the past. So
Yeah. So the productivity side of it is obviously very useful. On my side, using it to generate code, something that even I know how to do it, but it's going to take me 30, 45 minutes. 15 seconds. I give it the prompt, 15 seconds, it spits it out, and I've got it. So from a productivity standpoint, it's amazing. What is also amazing about it is how if you're willing to engage it and sort of let your mind get there, how real it feels. I mean, there have been times where I was so thankful for what it spit out. Like I found myself kind of thanking it. I'm like, oh, thank you, ChatGPT. Like as if it were a person. And that is really sort of the thing where I see this starting to go. And we see this already in things like Snapchat with the AI bots. As a gamer and as an RPG gamer, right? The thing that's fascinating to me is to see how far and how good it would be at emulating a person playing a game with you. And I've been really exploring that, and many people have as well. We're all kind of like trading different prompts as to like how to get that working and in the best way. But what I ended up doing was following suit from some other guys that have been doing this, which was to tell it to act as a dungeon master for a game of D&D. And I gave it all the prompts. I gave it all the command, like the setup. Basically said, like, you're going to be my DM. You're going to run my campaign. You're going to use 5th edition rules. I'll tell you my class, my race. I'll tell you my character and all that. You will be the dungeon master. Give me 3 options to get me started, and let's go. And it is amazing at being a dungeon master. because it not only generates really fascinating adventures, it creates characters along the way. It gives you the dialogue. It allows you to respond either with "I want to do this" or just to type in dialogue, and now you're actually conversing with these characters. And the gamer in me is like, this was so fun, partly because it brought me way back to the early days of gaming for me, with games like Zork, which were text-based games. It was purely text-based games, and it looked exactly like this, except now the possibilities are infinite instead of just what's limited to the tiny adventure that was programmed and put on the disc. So there was a nostalgia about it, but it was also just really fun. I mean, I ended up, I was traveling, and so I had, I had all these little pockets of time to kind of keep diving back to my phone to okay, one more round, one more turn, one more command, one more this, one more that. And I just found myself totally sucked into this adventure. By the end of the weekend, I mean, this only occurred over a few days. By the end of the weekend, I exported what we had talked about. And I forget what the final number was, but it was well over 60,000 words that we had gone through, which is that's a good novel. That's a good sized novel. And that's how many adventures we'd gone through. And not only that, but it wanted me to go on a dungeon crawl. I ended up going into town, telling it I wanted to open a business. I'm running a tavern. I'm running this. I got a bit. I mean, it's giving me P&Ls and balance sheets if I ask it. And so, it just the amount of kind of openness to it was addictive. But so here's the thing that happened though that was really interesting. To me at least. So I'm running the campaign, and like I said, in a traditional D&D game, you go and you kill a bunch of skeletons, you get the gold, you're happy about your adventure, and certainly it's more than that, but that's kind of the core way to play. In this adventure, like I said, I started running businesses. I ended up having this manor, and I invited other characters who were part of my businesses to come live there. I had this big sprawling estate where I had my I had a financial advisor. I had my campaign manager because I was going to do politics, and these are all characters that Chat GPT is spinning up and giving me dialogue for, and I'm traveling with them over 60,000 words of a story. And I started to get really invested in these characters. And almost in a way think of your favorite series, if you're an Avengers guy, Marvel guy, you think about how invested we get into those characters, right? This all happened over a weekend. And I am very invested in these characters. And it kind of dawned on me how invested I was. And I just started thinking about how this is a few days, it's text, and it's just an adventure that is very fantastical. It's not rooted in any real reality, but I'm really invested in these characters. So that was one thing. The other thing that happened was my character, through the adventures and through what ended up being probably a few years of game time, met a woman and married her. And that became part of the story. And so as I'm going through, and so I'm recapping all this to my wife, and I'm like, yeah, and this and this. And I was like, yeah, and then my wife and this. And she's like, whoa, 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 whoa. She's like, did you just say your wife?
Yeah, red flag.
Yeah. Now, again, I'm thinking video games. But she's like, you have an AI wife? And I was like, no. Yeah.
Oh.
And that started us down a very interesting conversation about the implications of this. And I had not thought about it. I'm thinking of it as a programmer, as to okay, what can ChatGPT do? I'm thinking of it as a video game player. But she's neither of those things. And she saw it from a different angle that I had not. And when she started to say well, I'm like, no, it's no big deal. It's just, it's just this. She's like, okay, how is it described? And I'm like, well, it's not described salaciously, but they're married. She's like, okay. She's like, is it third person or first person? I'm like, it's first person. So she said, okay, so ChatGPT says you and your wife. I'm like, yeah, I guess it does. And moving through it, I'm like, yeah, actually, this is probably very not okay. And I'm like, yeah, wow, okay, I see your point. So getting some separation from that, I'm looking at it, I'm like, holy cow, it's very easy to slip into that.
Yeah.
Not think it's a big deal. Become emotionally invested into characters that don't exist. And I thought, oh my goodness, this was 3 days with text. So removed from it, I'm like, okay, yeah, that not only was the time investment, just like my thoughts were too much going back to that thing. I'm like, all right, I'm going to delete that thread because I'm like, it's not a good thing. So I deleted the thread. All day that day, there was just the slightest feeling of grief that not just my AI wife, but all of those characters were gone. Like the way I felt when Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man died, where it was just like,
spoiler alert.
Please, yeah. Yeah. No, the way I felt there, like it was kind of like that, where it's like I'm feeling grief and that's stupid. Like I'm like, both of those things. I'm like, why am I feeling grief? That's dumb. But I'm feeling grief. All of that. So take all of that, and you can see where this is headed. Imagine now when the 2D art that you've just talked about now becomes, which it already is, being applied in the 3D context. So instead of saying I want a picture that a Monet, of this style of Monet or anything like that, it's spin me up a 3D avatar that looks like this.
Yep.
And then you hook in ChatGPT, which I was using version 4, which is significantly better than 3.5. And it still is, for all intents and purposes, terrible compared to what's on the horizon. Imagine the later versions of how good it's going to be at making that avatar seem real. You combine all of that, and that I just had this vision of what you and I and other people in Metaverse ministry are going to be dealing with, which are the people who are going to be using this for the real escape that I think people think are happening, which is I can just here. That's kind of the last thing I'll say about this is looking back at it. I was like, oh, this is going to be a nightmare because all of the relationships, all of the dialogue that I had in that, there were no fights. There was very slight disagreement. In the end, it was always whatever you want, dear. It was none of real life that makes our relationships real. None of it was there.
Wow.
But it's everything you would want it to be.
Yeah.
Except it's not real.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh my goodness, this is going to be an absolute nightmare and it is coming. And I will tell you this, and I'll leave you with this, and I just want to hear your thoughts about all of it, is there is 100% chance that you and I, at some point, somebody is going to ask us if we as ministers, as pastors, will marry them and their AI avatar, if we will perform the wedding for them. That is 100%. I don't know whether it's in 6 months or 6 years. We are definitely going to get that question. So that was it. That was my experience with it. And I think there's a lot to love about it. But that one was probably the first time that I really got a palpable feeling of, oh no.
Yeah. Holy cow, man. Holy cow. That's amazing. Just here, this is what I want to speak into on everything that you just said. Like you touched on really the gamut of emotions that a person feels and goes through in their journey in life. And you went through those emotions in a 3-day time span over fictional characters. Yep. Now this has been a conversation that I've been paying attention to. The in regards to like TikTok and Snapchat, not primarily Snapchat, but like TikTok, YouTube, Shorts, and Instagram stories, and all that kind of stuff. The way that we just scroll through stories, like
Yeah.
we experience different. Our brain is experiencing different emotions based off the stories that we're seeing, and we're retraining ourselves how to react to certain situations. And so the example that I saw was you can watch a video on TikTok of somebody who went through a traumatic experience, losing a loved one, somebody dying, suffering with cancer or whatever. And the very next video within a 15-second, 30-second, 3-minute time span, just put it within that kind of range, 30 seconds to 3 minutes, your next video is something that you're laughing at. So
Yeah.
your brain is adjusting from like crisis management, grief, all that to like, okay, now I'm laughing. So we're training ourselves to not process emotions appropriately. And what AI did for you, it sent you off on probably an even deeper emotional roller coaster ride in a 3-day time frame without you really, like, again, being immersed into it. You weren't fully aware of all the ups and downs that you're going through, of excitements, of lows, of like lulls, and all that kind of stuff, until you had the opportunity to unplug, sit back, reflect on everything that you just went through. And that's what we're facing with, like, when it comes to AI. So I think like I know AI has been around for a lot longer than it probably feels to the general public right now. Like, in fact, I'm reading this book right now. I don't know if you've heard it yet, Meta Church by Dave Abison. And so I just been kind of going through it. And oddly enough, strangely enough, coincidentally, I don't know, however you want to put it, the chapter that I was reading on today was actually, there's a section where it's talking about artificial intelligence. And I just want to highlight some of the stuff that was said in there, if you're good with it. So these are quotes from other people. So in a report in 2017 from The Atlantic, Jonathan Merritt described AI as the greatest threat to Christian theology since Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species. I was like, whoa, okay. And then, this one was fun. Vox.com ran an article, Vox, not Fox, Vox with a V, ran an article in January 2020 titled Robot Priests Can Bless You, Advise You, and Even Perform Your Funeral. like, come on. But the reality is, like, so these are articles from 3 years ago and as far as back as 2017 looking at AI, and we can hear that, we can read those now and kind of go, well, kind of like what I'm hearing on like major news networks right now. Like, maybe that's not so far-fetched anymore. Maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger's, Terminator, I'll be back, might be more around the corner than what we were thinking. Like the biggest threat with AI, according to, politicians, is just national security. Like, AI is learning. So 60 Minutes did a whole program on AI. And in this, they were talking about Google's AI. I forget what they call it. But it was learning to work around the roadblocks that Google had established. And in so doing, what it started to do was create its own language, and starting to talk to other AI systems, which then, if the AI is able to do a workaround its own security protocols and start talking to other AI, like, I guess our next gen director here at Lakeland, he was saying, somebody was like, how would you conquer the world in like the most efficient time frame possible? And AI started building out a plan. And so it was just like, it's just crazy. But again, we've been using AI for a while now. Like, I have Alexa in my house, right? So just anytime that I say, hey, Alexa, or I'm talking to, Apple's, I would say it. But I've be fearful that it would just go off and interrupt our podcast. But, I say, hey, whatever, can you do this? It's a learning program,
Yeah.
and it's learning who I am, what it is that I'm looking for, what do I like, all those kinds of things. So we interact with AI on a regular basis, but it's just now growing and learning and advancing so quickly that it is now highlighted in media for us to see, because of how quickly it is advancing. A lot quicker than even the programmers or the creators of these AI programs were ever projecting that it would progress to at this point. So we see like there can be a significant impact on an individual's life when it comes to artificial intelligence. And I had a guy, and this is probably the reason why I even brought up this conversation for us today, is I had a guy who hopped into our Discord, who's the one that pointed me to the 60-minute conversation. And he was pointing out to just like, man, is this a work of Satan? Like, can AI be a work of Satan? Like, yeah, like 100%, like anything can. But I think it becomes the responsibility of the church to see what our world is producing and figuring out how to use that in order to advance the kingdom, rather than seeing it as like a tool of the enemy. Because really,
Definitely,
everything is just a tool. It just depends on what hands it falls into and what you end up using it for.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I completely agree. It is anytime you're pulling chaos into order, it has God's fingerprint on it. That's his that's his thing. And so to even be able to pull ones and zeros into something that causes an emotional response, that's a creative act. Of course, Satan tries to warp everything that has God's fingerprint on it, and so this is no different. And so, we definitely need to be in the space. We definitely need to be on top of it and use it to our advantage, but also just be aware of where those pitfalls are, and be able to actually, if AI conquers the world, there's not much I'm going to do about it. But what I can do is like counsel and pastor and warn people on an individual basis, kind of like the experience that I had, that it's out there. And I firmly believe we are going to be dealing with AI addiction. I mean, I just saw it, and that's, I never met any. Give me something you can be addicted to. Like historically, I'm like, okay, I'm in. So that was one of them. Like, I'm a great litmus test of the addictive quality of things. That's one of them. But to me, I just see the money driving this. And I was hitting limits for ChatGPT 4, because you can only have like 25 requests per 3 hours or something like that. And I was hitting the limit, and I'm like, man, when can I go again? When can I go again? And at this point, you couldn't even like buy more uses. But if you could, I don't know, I probably would have thrown a few bucks at it. And I'm already paying for, the pro and, a monthly fee and all that. So anyway, like, there's money behind this. There's money to be made. And so if when they monetize the requests, when it's a nickel a request or $1 a request or whatever it may be, that's where I believe it's going to drive it more than anything that might like idiopathically happen with AI. The money's going to drive this, in my opinion, and it's just going to be just like anything else. It's going to be geared towards the way they can, whoever owns the best AIs, how can they make the most money with it, providing the thing that's addictive and getting people to pay for it. That's it. And so 100%, for me, the biggest danger at least from a pastoral standpoint, and from again, like I said, to the extent we can even do anything about it, is to deal with that sort of individual danger to, in engaging with it, and say, look, it's a great tool, but here are the dangers. Be careful, because this is a very real danger, and that's a very real danger, and this is a very real danger. That's what's got my wheel spinning.
Yeah, for sure. So like if I were to even bring that back into like just the VR side of things, like you said, like at some point in time there's going to become the capability that you can prompt AI to create your avatar or create an additional avatar for you. In fact, you and I are on a chat thread right now where there's a company that's looking at putting together their own platform with AI integrated, system, all that kind of stuff. Like that's coming down our pipeline when it comes
Yep.
to like churches and VR. Like you and I are very much aware of this, which I got to say, for somebody who's not good with like Unity or world building or anything like that, like you are, like that works out great for me because I can just tell, AI to generate this and boom, there it is.
Oh yeah.
And really the sky becomes the limit. But I also want to pull on that thread as to when it comes to like VR and AI together. Like my senior pastor here at Lakeland, Josh, he and I were having a conversation about this, and the question is like, because AI can create artwork, it can create videos, you can go to I think it's like these people aren't real.com or something like
Mhm.
that, and you see pictures of AI generated people that look real but they aren't real people. My senior pastor was talking about, is like, it's not going to be long before somebody types in, you know Stunami, slaps his wife, and here's a video, an AI generated video of me slapping my wife that I never did.
Yep. Yeah.
So
No.
like the enemy use in that goes way up. And so to Josh's point, and this is where I bring it back into VR because I think that this is the same realm. Like the Bible talks about the second coming of Jesus, like how some people will scoff at it. And
Mm.
my senior pastor was saying, like he always wondered why, how could that ever be the case? And he says, but yet you look at the time that we're living in with AI generated
Oh
videos,
wow.
us living in VR, like anybody can create a video that looks so real or create a space in virtual reality that looks so real, like Inception, right? Like you almost have to have that thing that ties you back to reality in order to get
Wow.
out of it. But we can create anything that come real time, come real second coming of Jesus, people will sit there and look at Jesus coming down from the clouds, and people are going to go, yeah, right.
Fake. It's a yeah. Wow. That's it's pretty good.
Welcome to the new world.
Yeah. No, I mean that's way deeper than I was thinking. I played through that campaign, and as a video game maker, I'm like, oh my goodness, like static story-driven RPGs are dead men walking because I had way more fun playing that than anything, and that was just text, than anything that would just be a single handcrafted story because I could take it in
Mhm.
so many different directions. I could be silly with it. I could be, as imaginative as I want it. So like the story-based RPG, that's going to be sometime soon. That's going to be a thing of the past. But like you said, I mean, even all the world building stuff, like a lot of what I do, it's already starting to be automated, and that's just that's the way it goes. Listen, a lot of what I do is being automated through AI in other spheres because lawyers like drafting a contract, like I've tested it. And I've said, hey, I want this type of clause, give me this clause. Now, I had to know whether it was doing a good job. Like
Yep.
I couldn't just say it and be like, well, I guess it's doing good. Like, I have to know if it's not, but I put it in and it did a great job.
Mm.
so I mean, there's a lot that it's coming down the pipe, and we all know this, and that's going to make things obsolete. And in one sense, that's okay. Like that, there is a progress to that where if we are taking that time and taking, like all of the things that have been made more efficient in our lives that allow us to do more things, at some point in history wasn't a thing, and people had to do those things manually. And I'm sure when it became obsolete, people lamented it and said, I wish we, go back to the good old days. And now if we were to have to do many of those things manually, we would be like miserable. Like, I can't do anything. I can do one thing a day and that's it. Like, right.
Yeah.
So that, it is the nature of things, but man, yeah, that How? Yeah, that's you blew my mind with that. That's pretty good about How would they not know if you make reality as you know if you make people as unsure about reality as possible, then that would be a way they would miss it. It's
Yeah.
pretty good insight.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, bro. Let's close this one up. So there's a lot of heaviness, weightiness to this conversation, but I think if, as church leaders, if we're not bringing it back to an arena of hope, we fail. So while there's a lot of weightiness, darkness to AI, what is the hope? Like, what is something good that you can give people to hold on to when it comes to AI?
Um, it will make us more efficient in what we do if we use it as the right tool. So we will be able to accomplish more in the name of the gospel. And so that's the main one. I think there is a silver lining that to the extent that it says it's not, it doesn't promote a religion or anything like that. It articulates the gospel well. I mean, if you ask it, what is the gospel of Jesus Christ? It articulates it very well. And so it is nice to know, at least for now, that if someone were by themselves and wanted to know about Jesus, it is at least that. And so I think there is a silver lining that it's not as if it's devoid of Christ. It just has it's a multi-edged sword in that sense. So that'd kind of be my shot from the hip with that.
Yeah, that's good.
You?
I think that I would say the same thing. Like, there is just the potential. There's going to be a potential with AI that we're going to be able to speak out scripture and the goodness of who God is in a completely different way now, that's going to reach somebody that we've never been able to reach before.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to be able to speak a new language, if you will, that it sparks, it hits. Like, that's the way that the Holy Spirit's going to move, and that's how God's going to make himself known to people that have been hard-hearted up until this point. So, like, if I were to give like even an example of what this could look like. So I grew up in an era with Boy Meets World as one of the most popular shows, and I'm actually rewatching it now because a couple of the actors have a podcast where they're rewatching each episode and they're talking it out, kind of thing.
That's great.
And one of the episodes that I just recently watched was the two of the main characters. They get their hands on a pop quiz that's coming out, and you got this one young teacher, Mr. Turner, the old teacher, wise sage voice in Mr. Feeney. And Mr. Feeney is talking to Sean and Corey, and Sean and Corey just do not understand a word that's coming out of Feeney's mouth. And yet Turner comes in, and he starts speaking to the boys at a different level, and it's the exact same words. He doesn't really change the words or anything like that. But for them, for Corey and Sean, boom, that clicked. Yeah. And I think that's going to be what AI brings in for really this, like, our generation, the younger generation, the generation that continues to move further away from the church. I think that AI is going to give us a platform and give us a language that speaks to who they are, where they're at, that then draws them back to the goodness of God. So that would be the piece of hope that I would give in all of this. It's like there's true potential coming with it. So yeah, man, great conversation. There's probably so much more that we could chase after on this one, but maybe we'll save that for a part 2 or a follow-up conversation one of these days. But let's go ahead and close it out. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us. As always, if you would do us a favor by hitting that subscribe button, sharing this episode, leave a rating and review. All those things help us out. If you want to stay connected with us in between the episodes, the best way that you can do that is hop over to our Discord. All of the links that you need to know about are going to be down in the show notes that you can just click on and join us from there. And then we will be back next week with another episode as we continue to just talk about the metaverse and what in the world does the church have anything to do with that, all wrapped up in a podcast. So until then, be blessed.